Mark, and on behalf of Mark and the rest of the Steelcase organization, we want to welcome you to our home here at Fort Columbus Circle. We are thrilled to be part of this great event this morning, and we know that many of you have never been to Steelcase before. So what we just want to make you aware of is when you're in the area, if you are working or if you need a place to meet or grab a cup of coffee, whatever, please know that our house is your house. Additionally, we love to host these types of events. So if your organization ever is in need of that, let us know, and I'm sure that we can accommodate. The last thing that I would say is we truly want to make this a great experience for you. So if there's anything that I can do, Mark, some of our other Steelcase colleagues back there that are sprinkled around the room, just let us know. So again, welcome, and with that, I will turn it over to John. All right, thanks, John.
All right, I'm going to use a mic. I'm Jonathan Bowles. It's such a thrill to be here. I want to thank Tim and Mark from Steelcase. What a fun place to be, and amazing view of Central Park on this wintry day. So the Center for Neurofuture has been around for almost 20 years now, and in case you don't know a lot about the center yet, we're a think tank, and since the very beginning, we've been focused on how can New York grow and diversify its economy. And over the years, we've written studies about the promise of the biotech sector. We've looked at the air cargo industry. We've written about the kind of burgeoning tech sector in New York. We've written a lot about the arts and the creative economy. And as we did all this economic research, it really became clear, particularly when we were writing about the creative economy, that design is one of the most important but kind of underappreciated parts of New York's economy. In fact, we called it the unsung engine of New York's creative economy. And we didn't know this when we started, but the design sector actually has more firms in New York than any other part of the creative industry, the creative sector. So more than publishing, more than film, there are more design firms than all of those things. New York City also has a real competitive edge in design. Our work from a few years ago, a study called Growth by Design, showed that New York City has far and away more designers than any other U.S. city. So there's something like 39,000 designers in New York. The next largest design hub in the U.S., L.A., had about 22,000. So New York is the clear leader. We also have amazing design universities in the school. I see Peter from Pratt, David from the New School in Parsons, so many other great schools that are here. New York City graduates more than twice as many students every year in architecture and design as any other U.S. city. So this is an incredible foundation for economic growth. And in fact, design has been growing over the last 10, 15 years quite a bit. And so, this is something that's so important for New York, but we really feel like there's a lot that still could be harnessed. How do we harness New York City's amazing assets in design? And so one of the ideas from our initial Growth by Design study was that New York should really have a design week, a multi-disciplinary design week that really showcases our incredible assets in design. And we're thrilled that last year the city went forward with NYC by Design. And what a great hit it was. So many of you were a part of that, and I think it was such an amazing starting point. But we really felt like it was important to have a conversation about how do we build on this? How do we improve this? How do we make a design week something that is self-sustaining and that continue to grow and really be a real shining light for New York's design assets and for New York's economy. And so we brought together an amazing group of panelists here today to really talk about what were the lessons learned from last year, what can we learn from some other cities that have design weeks, and how do we make this bigger and better? And I want to first bring up our amazing research director, David Giles, who's written all three of our reports on design. You can check them out on NYCfuture.org. David has done an amazing job, and he's going to moderate this panel, and we have a really fabulous group of panelists. So everybody, please join me in welcoming David and our panelists.
introduce our panelists today. Willie Wong is the Chief Creative Officer at New York City and Company, and the person behind last year's event. He played a big role in creating the New York City's first ever design week. Eddie Opara is a designer and principal at Pentagram, a prominent design company in New York City. Kyle Mead is vice president at Fab.com. You all know what Fab.com is. I don't need to probably say anything about that. Caroline Baumann is the director of the Cooper-Hewitt Museum. And I'm glad to say that we have Kyle Mead here, the president, thank you, of the Economic Development. Kimball. We have two Kyles, so I'm trying to keep them straight. Kyle Kimball is the president of the New York City Economic Development Corporation. And before I start throwing out questions, I did want to take 2 minutes really to say why we at the Center for an Urban Future found Design Week such a powerful idea. And it wasn't just because New York has an incredible competitive advantage in design, although that's a big reason. It's that design services, there's so much room to expand design services beyond a fairly narrow band of elite consumers. The industry can grow quite a bit, we believe. Also, we thought that there was so much energy already happening in New York City. So many nonprofits and museums and universities putting on events throughout the city that we thought a city-sponsored event could be a great way to link all of this activity and to amplify it, really. So I want to throw out the first question to Willie and ask, what happened last year? What were we able to accomplish last year?
So, I think last year definitely was a huge success for the organizers of this event. When we set off initially, we weren't really sure what we would be able to accomplish. We had goals for ourselves. We thought that initially one goal would be to just gather the disparate parts of the design community together in a more formalized way, which I don't think that happened. There were efforts from the Cooper-Hewitt and from various pockets, but it seemed like the circles never fully joined. And so that was one goal, was to get as many people in the room speaking and engaging. The other side was to just build visibility for the sector and to expand people's understanding of what design was. And so that was a really important goal for us to, when people spoke about design, even within the committee, everyone had either fashion in their mind or graphic design or architecture, and they would just use the word design and forget the other disciplines. So it was really interesting to start to expand both internally and externally that definition. And in terms of actual events, we were hoping to get 50 events or so from the various participants, and by the end of closer to May, I think over the 12 days we had about 350 unique events and maybe over 900 opportunities for people to do something around design. We had about 200 organizers all working together to create new events and to shift some things within this moment in time. And the social media and the web presence was pretty phenomenal. And so I think from our end, very first year, the traction that we got within the industry and the exposure that we were able to get from press coverage and everything was right on. And so I think this is a great opportunity for us to figure out, well, what is next?
I'd love to chime in and say hats off to Willie and Ed and the whole team at NYC and Company. The speed with which they pulled this off was extraordinary. In late 2011, Cooper-Hewitt called a meeting of all interested parties, and we thought we would get maybe 15 to 20 people. We had nearly double that. I mean, the room was completely full. We didn't have enough coffee. And the energy was so palpable. Everyone there so much wanted a New York City Design Week. And you all pulled it off in less than a year with terrific branding, a logo that was created by NYC and Company and Base Design that is so strong and will continue through the years. It's so recognizable. I really think that that's a great start. We saw it all over the city with superb advertising, which is key. We need even more of that in this year. The events were fantastic. I think for our first year, I just want to applaud their efforts because it was terrific, and we really have a great base from which to build.
And before I ask other people, get other people into the discussion, I wanted to ask Willie quickly again, and I think a lot of people are wondering in the room, what can we expect for this year?
That's a work in progress as usual. The committee actually has expanded a little bit because there was so much demand to actually be participating in the actual planning. So we've been meeting every month to figure out what will be the next step. We actually just met yesterday morning, and part of it will be still an aggregation of events. One of the things that we actually discovered post-mortem was that people were overwhelmed with all of the options. And so organizing and creating a little bit of hierarchy and various curatorial tracks to enable people to decide they would prefer this type of discipline, or they're from the profession and they really want trade events versus you're just visiting New York and happen to stumble upon this and you just want to be inspired by design. We're going to break down the different audiences a little bit more and make it easier for people to experience the week. So that's like one
date.
the date for this coming year is May 9 to 20th.
Kyle, you played a role in setting up last year's Design Week. You were on one of the steering committees. Are there things we can learn from last year? Are there new ideas that we can bring to this year's festival?
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think for me and for most people who, well, I just so everyone knows, I represent a very large community of emerging designers, and just the sole fact that this was happening was good enough for me. So just the fact that it's starting, the city's involved, they're paying attention to the design community was huge, and again, to be invited up to the Cooper-Hewitt, to be in pockets of little organizations that were brewing and percolating before this whole NYC by Design steering committee thing started was exciting, and it was almost like as soon as the NYC by Design happened, we were all ready. It was like a moment in time where we're like, we can actually do this. We know it's been buzzing for the past couple of months. Let's do this. The things that I have to say about year one that could be more improved in year two, I think are just more of a street presence, more for the exhibits themselves. Last year was great. We've been doing this for years already. So just slapping a logo on it and having everybody under the umbrella of NYC by Design is a great first step. But now we have to start bringing these things to the surface and bringing these things out and having venue spaces that are more appropriate to celebrate design in the public, not only for the tight-knit community that is in this room, but also for the public and the tourists that we can take advantage of. Because there's economic stimulus in this whole idea, and that really needs to come through and we have the talent. We have the designers here. You've proven that in the reports. So how do we bring those people to the surface? How do we make those things, stay for the whole week and maybe even, plant seeds for them to exist for the whole year? So I think that there's a lot of work to do, but the idea that we're now paying attention to it in the right way that we should, we could be rivaling Fashion Week in a couple of years. So.
Eddie, wanted to ask you quickly, if there's anything specific we can learn from what other cities are doing. You're from London, right? You trained in London.
Yes, that's correct. I don't know if this is working, but I think everybody can hear me, correct? Right, so yeah, I'm originally from London, and London has a burgeoning design week itself. It's not as important as Milan per se, but the fact there is that it doesn't have that much funding. The aspect with the government and the connection to the government, local government that is fairly strong, but yet the funding that's provided by the government is a lot weaker. And I think that provision is incredibly important because the local government is really the voice box of the people, and so that allows people to understand what design is and how it can actually change their lives and enhance their lives. I mean, we always think about the aspects of design from the principles of architecture, fashion, graphic design, and so on and so forth, but it's a plethora of different disciplines within design that need to connect to the people that need it most, and I think that's very, very, very important. Another item to talk about is that design festivals around the world are growing immensely. The prime example is Design in Daba in South Africa, which my fellow partner here, Michael Baruch, has been working with them for many years. They are the largest design conference in the world in South Africa. And imagine that, everybody flying in from everywhere, and also within Africa, to understand a lot more about the principles of how design can actually enhance their livelihoods. So I think that's a important fact.
May I? I think we can learn a lot from design weeks that have been going on for decades in London, Milan, Prague, Paris. For example, last year in London, RUP actually collaborated with the Dean of the School of Architecture at the Royal College of Art. And they constructed this wooden staircase a la Escher. And the public was invited and encouraged to go up the stairs, and it had a beautiful view. It was right in front of the Tate. We need to do this. We need to explode Design Week, so it is not only the design industry and all of us who love design who enjoy the 300 or 500 events. We need to infiltrate New York City with Design Week. We need that awesome logo in every single window, not only at Alessi and the Conran shop, or the no longer Conran shop, right? So that's really, I think, a key point. I mean, to make that happen, we need corporate sponsorship, right? Like anything in the cultural world, that's absolutely necessary. But we need a design takeover. We need the public to get engaged and really know what design is and what Design Week is, and celebrate it with us.
One thing I was attracted to by London's Design Festival, even though it's not the largest in the world, one thing it seemed to do is bring different government agencies to the table. I know that UK Trade and Investment began a sort of export assistance initiative that they used the Design Festival as a platform for. There were some workshops to deliver design consulting services to small businesses in the city. There were some programs around entrepreneurship. I think they were doing around Design Week. And so I kind of want to bring it back to Kyle Kimball. EDC does so much already on entrepreneurship. EDC does so much for Fashion Week. I'm wondering, what can EDC bring to the table for New York City by Design? What can we learn from Fashion Week?
Sure. So we have, in many ways, we have so many things going on that either directly or indirectly touch design, whether or not it's sort of the more direct touch around stimulating entrepreneurship. We are specifically have been in the past very focused on working with the maker community and doing a bunch of events and competitions to sort of stimulate a community that's very focused on industrial making, essentially, and stimulating that, as well as entrepreneurship. It's certainly very important. And I think we have sort of big picture things that are very focused on making sure that we are, in many ways, working with our sister agencies like NYC and Company, Cultural Affairs, as well as our private sector and public sector quasi-governmental partners to sort of curate the conditions for elements of design in the city, sort of part of the pun. But the idea is there's big picture things where we're focused on that New York City remains and grows as a place where people essentially learn design. So a good example of that is our program in the Brooklyn Navy Yard with Carnegie Mellon. It's focused on integrative media. So that's essentially a place where people will come to New York City and sort of learn principles of design in a very specific way. Or our media lab in Dumbo, for example, sort of on the media space. Our Applied Sciences initiative, where we are bringing people to this, or attracting people to the city to learn the applied sciences and the relationship to the environment in the city, or the CUSP program in Brooklyn, also part of the applied sciences. But then, so those are the bigger picture things where I think we are focused on making sure that New York City is a place where people come to learn, and specifically, and also generally is focused on issues of design and how they interact. These other bigger picture piece would be something where we are also very focused on that New York City remains a place where designers can live. And whether or not that's a place where they have plenty of jobs to practice, whether or not they have affordable housing in which to live, whether or not they have cultural institutions that support their work, or industries that are going to consume their product. And I think lastly, and this is relating to you, is things like Design Week sort of fit into a third category. I would say we're also very focused on making sure that this is a city where people can appreciate and experience and consume the amazing products that are coming out of today's designers, whether or not it's having more of a public presence in Design Week, or having ways where design can address some of our bigger challenges around inequality, where form can also follow function, and we can bring things where issues of design can infiltrate some of the larger social policy questions that we face. So I think we are, in many ways, very focused on the way design can help us solve many of the challenges we have in the city, as well as, at the end of the day, make sure that New York City remains a place as it is today, and grows as a place where people are incredibly inspired to design and to view design.
And on the fashion question in particular, EDC, of the design disciplines, fashion is the area where EDC has really sort of concentrated its efforts. And wondering if you think expanding some of those efforts toward other areas of design and maybe concentrating them around a design week is something that would be feasible.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea. We're obviously, on Fashion Week in particular, I think we have a fairly light touch, because it's something that really doesn't need much government intervention. It's sort of on its own. We certainly want to work with our partners to continue it and support it. But we are more focused, I think, on the entrepreneurship side of fashion, so our fashion incubator in the garment district, as well as working with the garment district to preserve or to help it thrive within the city, because it's very important that we support the ecosystem elements that help us remain a fashion capital. I mean, the idea that we have 50,000 people in the city who are practicing designers, and I think that number is quite understated. There's many things that we can do to make sure that entrepreneurs are able to thrive. And there are direct programs that we can do, but there's also the conditions. So having real estate solutions where people have inexpensive places to go and do their design and can be inspired. So places like Sunset Park, for example, where opening up parts of the city so that we can solve some of the basic infrastructure challenges, and infrastructure I would define as real estate. So there's direct things we can do, and I think it's an interesting idea we've thought about, but also the bigger picture pieces around making sure that the conditions are in place so that people can grow and thrive here.
Caroline, you made the important point about needing to, for Design Week, get the stickers in the windows of businesses and organizations outside of the sort of traditional design sphere. One idea behind New York City's Design Week was, to use this as a platform for community development initiatives in boroughs outside of Manhattan. Design is so concentrated in this one borough, and even more concentrated in Midtown Manhattan. How do we get these events? How do we get participants involved outside of this one area?
Well, first of all, I'm a big Brooklyn fan, and I think that a huge percentage of our design genius is in Brooklyn, and I think people in the industry know that. I think Fashion Week happening in Brooklyn this season was fantastic. I get back to the visibility. We need to have pop-up design projects, maybe at Rockefeller Center, maybe at 91st and 5th, hey, maybe, in Brooklyn, in Queens. We've got to pop up in all 5 boroughs. And something that Cooper-Hewitt did last year on the education side, because we really believe that Design Week should affect people of all ages, not just the professional designers and adults. But we went into a PS3 downtown and had our Design in the Classroom program, which was a huge success, and we took over the school for a full day during Design Week. Now, we're taking that to Queens this year. I'd like to see that in every single borough in dozens of schools during Design Week. So the kids can then come home and say to their parents, look, you know, I got this little, you know, package from New York City Design Week and I learned the power of design today. You know, start young and really, again, infiltrate. I keep coming back to that word, but that's what we need to do. So pop-up exhibitions where, excuse me, where we can. In yesterday's meeting, we were talking about a design truck that would go around the city and really provide information to people that don't know about Design Week or don't even know about design. We need to make that happen. We need to be mobile, we need to be agile, and we need to get into every single home.
And as Kyle Kimball mentioned, you know, the Fashion Week happens kind of under its own power. The city has a real light touch. And you know, I think that's probably the model for New York City by Design as well, is to provide an umbrella for events that are kind of happening anyway. How do we get organizations to, you know, put up the money and the energy and to coordinate their efforts around this 1 week? You know, what can Fab.com do, for instance?
Well, I mean, to spin this and to get back to the boroughs, I think it's important to know that Karen Oster's in the room and Brooklyn Designs is a really big thing. And there are things out there in happening in other boroughs, and I think it's about people. I think it's about empowering the right people to do these projects. Because, you know, one thing that's happening with the steering committee is that our wheels are spinning. Well, we all have day jobs. And we're not actually giving the power, our ideas, to people who can, maybe even if these people are presenting action plans to us, and then we are empowering them to go do these things, giving them a full-time gig to do and to set these things in motion. And I'm not just talking for 1 week. I mean, I think, you know, NYC by Design Week is really important. It's a rallying cry. It's a time of year we can all get together. And you know, where I kind of fall short with comparing this too heavily with Fashion Week is this sort of, and Mark back there and I were talking about this culture versus commerce thing, where, you know, there's money in the industry for Fashion Week. And Fashion Week's driving force is the money that it brings into the city, you know, the people's ability to sell and, you know, make their living. But design, there's so much potential for, and I'm not, you know, throwing Fashion Week under the bus here, but I do think that, like, some of the conversations in recent meetings, we've been talking about, you know, Hurricane Sandy and what design could do to help that effort. So for me, the design conversation is much bigger than just this, you know, a stimulus plan for you know, growing jobs. Though I do believe that's very important, and I'm coming from a perspective of an emerging designer who, you know, I was busy working hard to try and get my own designs out there and helping other designers do the same thing. But we're sort of ignoring this whole idea of like what else we can do for public spaces and the way that an installation goes in front of the tape. Could that be something more that actually is more permanent, that helps the area? And also, are there other things like Hurricane Sandy in which Design Week or the NYC by Design Committee could actually help with a real world issue in New York City and make it really important? So there's a little bit of I think those two categories, culture and commerce, are really important to note, that we're trying to tackle both issues at all times. And a lot of the times our meetings can tend to be divided in one way or the other because we're not clearly defining what one meeting is about or what one half of the meeting should be about. Does that make sense? But I do, you know, to answer your question, companies like Fab, you know, these corporate companies, I mean, we're a startup, so, you know, our money is, we have a plan to hit our investments and stuff like that. But we can help, like, we can definitely do things. I think we just have to be asked the right way. Like, no one's asked us. I'm sitting on this committee, but I was on this committee before my interests were with Fab. So, you know, lucky. But I think that we need to put together proposals in which we can ask corporations to participate and what we expect out of them. Because we're asking corporations to actually take time out of their plan and their schedule to, you know, pay attention to us. So, mutually beneficial.
It's a really great point. Willie, how do we pose the question to not just the Fab.coms, but, you know, the Bank of Americas and these other large corporations who are also big consumers of design?
Yeah, I think the way that we thought about it is that unlike a fashion week where 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't something that had been happening in a strong, organized way in the city. NYC by Design is anchored by major happenings and organizations, from Brooklyn Design to ICFF, Wanted, all of these entities that have their own corporate sponsors and museums and everything. We have this whole infrastructure, and so the territory that we want to tread is to not pull away from what might be already invested individually in folks, but to perhaps convince new corporations that might not have a presence in New York yet. And I think these are active conversations that the team at NYC Company have been trying to push forward. So any help on that front would be greatly appreciated. Yeah.
So another big important question that I think we should all grapple with a little bit is whether or not the organizing of Design Week, whether or not it should be a government agency, or maybe it's a dedicated nonprofit that works year-round to raise money and organize the event. I'd like kind of each of you to maybe tackle that question and bring your own perspectives to bear on it. But I'll start with you first, Shirley.
Again, I think it depends on what the fundamental objectives that we have, both expressed internally and externally. When you asked me what were the outcomes of NYC by Design, I did mention that one of them was actually bringing together different city agencies under one platform to talk about how the design happens within government. And so there have been multiple panels and workshops and collaborations by different agencies specifically on this effort. Now, we just recently experienced a transition in the administration, so a lot of these relationships might have to be rebuilt. But I think there's a lot of desire from folks who either purchase design or utilize design to do it in this integrated way. And I think as designers, that's what we're always striving for, right? Like a seat at the very, very beginning when design can come help in a strategic way. And I think that definitely needs to continue and happen. And so whether or not that NYC by Design is organized internally within government or outside, it could be either, I think, but from so far, from NYC company standpoint, it's allowed us to convince agencies and their leaders to commit to this effort.
I think it's early days. Just on one, and I think the whole idea is that we need to see certain patterns occur. One of the things that New York City does have, it has certain commissions that deal with design, such as the Design Commission in regards to architecture and environmental graphics, to basically advise on the aspects of rules and regulations as well as certain aesthetic ideals, which can be in a certain sense quite subjective. But I go back to what I'm earlier stated, it's early days. We need to learn a lot more before sort of trying to place oneself into government in any way or form. I think an advisory board to a certain degree, which is independent, that doesn't really deal with the aspects of policy, needs to be pushed more so than integrating itself fully into government.
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything that's been said. I think NYC company's done a great job, and I think they have a reputation, and that's what's drawing people in. And that's really important for us, because going forward, I just think that there's so much more we can do, and it is early days, but we need to make big strides in the beginning to continue on to do bigger things later. So, everything has already been said, I feel like, up here, but getting people to come in and help out, getting corporations to participate in what we're doing, in a bigger way, getting small shops to really, understand that we need to get involved and not stay out because that's the cool thing to do, but really get involved and put the sticker in the window. And any other little ideas and ways that we can empower people to do their ideas better It's very important.
And I just want to ask the same question in a different way because it just occurred to me. And another way you might frame the question is, New York City and Company is promoting this event and doing a terrific job with the branding. And I remember last year in Times Square seeing all of the signs in Times Square. I mean, it was really pretty tremendous. But I wonder if more than there requires a lot more than just promoting the event. That we need an organization that is year-round, organizing events, bringing in partners, raising funds to do all of this, or maybe it really is just a completely bottom-up effort that we should brand and do little more than just brand. And that's a question, I guess, and I think it's actually a perfect one for you to tackle.
Well, I was at Maison Objet 2 weeks ago, and I ran into 3 New Yorker friends in the RAR going out to Maison Objet, and I had to laugh. The quality of that trade fair is fantastic, and it brings people in from across the world. Same thing with Milan Design Week, Paris Design Week, within Paris itself, Prague. We need to become that magnet, and NYC and Company are pros, right, at tourism. I think they're the ideal organization to be leading this charge. We need everybody's help to make this the best design week in the world, and it won't be in the first year, obviously. But they're doing a stellar job, and they open doors and they make things happen.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is I actually don't view NYC&Co as government at all, and so I think NYC&Co is well positioned. I mean, and sometimes we're government, sometimes we're not. I mean, economic development is sort of the same way. Sometimes we are an agency, sometimes we are a not-for-profit. And I think NYC&Co, in terms of its relationships, is really well positioned. I would say, though, that back to a point that Kyle made earlier, was that I do, though, think it's important to think of there's so much happening in design, whether or not it's Open House New York, in terms of what Municipal Art Society is doing, in terms of thinking about issues of resiliency. And I think there is enough meat there on the bone to make it more than a week, but that it's a year-round discipline highlighting what the role that design is playing in this city. So I think NYC&Co is poised well to do that as well.
I think that was part of the aspiration of last year, that the 10 days really served as a catalyst for a year-round conversation. And now funding, as Caroline mentioned, is a really important component to this. And the fact that NYC Company at the end of the day is responsible for tourism across all categories and across all audiences. It's one of like 200 things that we do throughout the whole year. And so there is a thought to, okay, how do we get this into someone's portfolio in a dedicated way? And I don't know after where 5 years out it might go.
I mean, it is quite hard. You've got Fashion Week, you've got October, you have ICFF, to name a few, and they're all separated across the calendar. And I think that was one of our issues at the beginning. Like, when are we going to have this particular event? And it sort of, I think in a sense it is dawning on us that yes, it is, as Carl said, an umbrella, but yet it needs to integrate, it needs to sow itself through all those events at those specific times. We cannot allow Fashion Week to move its dates. We can't allow ICFF to move its dates into the National Design Week to move its dates into one month per se, and that'll just be absolutely chaos, and it just won't work. So how can this structure, this umbrella, sow itself all the way through the different weeks, all the way through the calendar, and how can it really relate and also pull out the items that aren't being seen? So, for instance, how much outreach is there within Fashion Week out in the Bronx, out in certain parts of Crown Heights and Bed-Stuyvesant? How can it sort of gravitate out to neighborhoods? I'm not saying boroughs, but to neighborhoods that really don't see it at all. Is that feasible? Is it viable? And remember, to create an economy, you need to have a lot more people are. You need to have everybody involved to you know, create growth. We can't just be stagnant. So that's an important factor. I think I've said a lot there.
So I'd like to open up questions to the audience. I imagine a lot of you have questions for the panel members, and I already see a hand. So do you want should we do the microphone, or can you shout your questions that everyone can hear? Okay.
My name is Victoria Milne, and I am actually government. I work at the Department of Design and Construction. I wanted to just supplement what you're asking a little bit about how government's involved. One of the things I've done at DDC over the years is work on design policy. I worked on the Design and Excellence Architecture Program, and then Active Design, which we rolled out, and I'm very happy with Terry Matthews to be representing the agency on the executive committee. But you asked about government involvement as a part of the Design Week, and we just started 2 programs that have spun out of this. One is Built NYC, which is funded initially through NYC by Design with City Council money, and we're commissioning local designers to do custom furnishings as part of capital projects that the city does. And the other is an upcoming suite of contracts that the city is going to be able to issue to product designers, environmental designers, and communication graphic designers. So the city, we're putting these things in place as explicit outreach as an offspring of this program. So
We've been given the download on all that, and it's very exciting.
thanks.
And it's amazing, like the work that you've done, it's like amazing, so.
And I also think it just underscores the importance of an event like this. I mean, it's, you know, this event is promoting the power of design and promoting what a huge part of our economy this is, in order to get government agencies like DDC to think about what they can do to you know, improve the procurement process for design, which is what this new program does. So I think it's a perfect example of what this week can achieve.
Yeah, I just wanted to underscore that it is about products, and you know, I appreciate all the wonderful products that all the designers make, but it's also about quality of life. You know, like design really improves your quality of life, and so I think getting people out into the different areas was great. And I just wonder, I don't know, I honestly didn't come last year. I somehow wasn't on my radar screen, but you know, if you like opened it up to the community, to like a little like Open House New York, but people could showcase their offices, their product, you know, you could have tour all over, you know, where all these different pockets of creative activity are, and you know, maybe you could even also open it up to these pop-up projects. I mean, groups in certain neighborhoods, you know, might want to get together. So you could kind of combine the grassroots effort of the energy of the areas with, you know, this overall great, that's a wonderful initiative that I wasn't aware of yet, all this other design. You know, I think it could be a great combination of sort of bottom up and top down.
I totally agree with you, and I think that, again, is it something that NYC by Design should do, or is it something that all of the participating organizations should do? For example, outside of NYC Company, I serve as president for AIGA New York, which is the largest graphic design or communications design organization in the country, and the biggest chapter and in the world. And that's like the other side gig. One of the outcomes of NYC by Design for us was to switch our focus from just purely inspiring and helping the professionals in New York in this community, but also to bring that towards the community. So we were able to use a grant from ArtPlace, which I know a couple of other folks here received, to highlight how design can affect communities. And the filter we actually had was, it's called Design Relief, where the neighborhoods of Rockaways, Red Hook, and then South Seaport are going through design charrettes within communities and bringing people together and visualizing and expressing what design can do in neighborhoods from a social standpoint, economic. So I think it is multi-tiered, but it's about should it be this platform, or should this platform inspire everyone to do those type of projects?
I'm on the private side in the art and real estate industry, and I think that if you can unify yourselves under one umbrella and then bring in all of the design people and groups and companies under an umbrella, you will have so much more power. You'll be able to build more quickly, and all of us who are involved in these different design industries will be able to come to you with ideas and execution that just makes New York City more important. We're poised, but somebody has to be the leader and holding that umbrella.
Oh, hi, Julie Menon. I have to say I'm so excited by what I hear today. It's really tremendous what you've done so far and the potential in the future. One of the examples you might want to look at is Art Basel and the way that Art Basel was set up, really with that entity 100% dedicated to doing Art Basel, and really what the city of Miami Beach did, where you had a number of private citizens, people like Craig Robbins and others, who really spearheaded bringing Art Basel to Miami Beach. And from an economic development standpoint, Art Basel in 1 week brings close to $600 million of economic revenue to the city of Miami Beach. There's no reason why we couldn't do something like that here, but I do agree it requires private citizens working collaboratively with government and creating probably a separate, not-for-profit, completely dedicated year-round to raising funds.
We have a lot of hands now. The gentleman on the left here. Yes, you.
Should I wait for the mic? My name is Mark Ginsberg. I'm an architect, and this is a question of concern about diffusion. As many of you may know, there is an Arctober, which is organized by the AIA, which has a lot of related organizations involved in it. How does that tie into this? Does that compete with that? Is that totally separate? Because I see in other fields you get too many people doing similar things and it sort of weakens them all.
Well, I think that's a question that we're grappling with here, and I don't think we found a definitive answer for it. The question of whether or not we should move these events to happen in 1 week, I think that's a question of how we.
But Fashion Week has 2 times a year. Why can't we? I think it was year one was like sort of the out of the gate thing. There was a discussion about where should this fall early on, and from my hand went up in the air for ICFF to be the time of year that we rally around based on how designers work and how we're at our October, you're in the 4th quarter. And as a designer, emerging designer, or any sort of designer, we're really focused on releasing product around the time of ICFF so that we can sell it through October. But that doesn't mean that we can't actually now, maybe year 2, 3, hopefully, is like get programming that's maybe based around education in October, and to be part of these other great events that are happening, like the AA, like the Cooper-Hewitt does, and just really put it at 2 ends of the spectrum 2 times a year with a different message each time, possibly.
Both Rick and Laura from AIA New York are very active members of the steering committee. And again, it goes back to these organizations have been here, the museums, a lot of us have been here, and we work 365 across the year. And so really, should this platform be something that just calls attention to things that are happening every day, every week? Or is it a concentrated effort like Fashions Night Out, which was another model that we initially discussed as a great way to complement something like the 2 different fashion weeks that happened during the city, to kind of make this one moment and a bigger splash in terms of visibility. Again, it's really the steering committee that has to collectively push the different kind of approach we've had.
I mean, Fashions has 2 seasons, and so that's a natural sort of occurrence. We have to really consider other design practices that we haven't even talked about today, and I don't think we can, that really don't work in that particular aspect. So the whole idea is not seeing a Goliath here and then being controlled by the Goliath, but making sure that the sort of granular approach is being seen, but all the different design disciplines is sort of ticked off and we can make sure that we thread ourselves all the way through the year rather than maybe 2 times a year. Sort of opinion.
And the bottom line is, Cooper-Hewitt's mission is to inspire, educate, and empower people through design. our involvement with NYC by Design is not to say Cooper-Hewitt, but to say, let's embrace all of these efforts and together, sing the same song. So we can all come together and do this. We're in the 8th year of our National Design Week and the 15th year of the National Design Awards. And one thing that we do during National Design Week is list every single design event, performance, lecture, etc., that's happening across the nation. So yes, it's about Cooper-Hewitt, it's about the National Design Awards and celebrating the winners, but it's also about all of the design across the nation. We need to do that in the city too, and we can.
Andrew Kimball. I just wanted to reiterate the outer borough opportunity. I think a lot of you spoke to that very eloquently, but I was lucky enough to run the Navy Yard for the last decade, and now am repositioning 6 million square feet of space in Sunset Park in Industry City. And the enormous demand for innovation economy space, small spaces for entrepreneurs who are driven by design and technology is just off the charts, and it's all moving to the outer boroughs, not just to Brooklyn, but to Queens, to the South Bronx. And I think there's a real opportunity as you all look in your leadership roles to expand the design week opportunities to look at what's happening along the East River and how that could be linked through ferry service and getting people out to see these sites, because this is really where the young designers and entrepreneurs are all moving to their businesses, and it's where they can afford to live.
And something we haven't talked about is manufacturing, and that's where that will exist. We want to keep it here. That's where it will exist.
In the back, the man standing up by the pillar there.
Hi, my question loosely relates to these ideas about sponsorship and whether both the universities and maybe software companies have been targeted as to kind of bookends, corporate bookend. Every designer depends on software, and every designer usually comes out of a training program, many of which are based in New York City. So to what extent are Parsons and Pratt and Columbia and all of these other schools in the region playing a role in Design Week, and how can we bring them in to the mix?
We don't have anyone from one of the universities, but Peter Barney, the provost of Pratt, is here and raising his hand. So.
Great question. From an educational perspective, when we look at this week at the end of May, Pratt invests about $1 million in graduating 800 rookies, designers into the field. We have a Pratt show, a fashion show, participate in Brooklyn Designs. So when I look at that from an educational perspective, it's about $1 million in launching careers. And yes, we can interface, I think, with New York by Design, but I think if the definitions of areas to interface are a little clearer, meaning where do the educational units or the human face of it, whether they're rookies or emerging designers or senior designers, where does the product piece fit? Where does the cultural piece fit within that? And I think layer it a little bit, because it can get very confusing. It's as successful as you want. What are you going to do with 300 events? And who in the public is going to understand what their interface is? So I think one of the things is to give us a map so we can at least hook the investment we're doing into that. We're committed to it, but we're, sort of up to here at that time of May. And I think all the other schools are probably in much the same situation.
I see a hand in the very back.
Good morning. My name is Giles. I'm the chairman of the Public Administration Department at Medgar Evers College, and actually former commissioner of the New York City Department of Business Services. I wanted to reflect on the comments that were made regarding there's about 50,000 people approximately in the design industry pursuits, and that was probably a low number. And also the comment with respect to not just reaching out to the boroughs, but also to the neighborhoods, because I agree with the statement that that's probably a low number. But there's a lot of people who are creative, who are certainly involved in design activity, who are not necessarily included in any of this process that we're talking about right now. New York City is arguably one of the most diverse cities in the world, But most of our major industries, I think we'd have to agree, do not reflect that diversity. And so my question to the panel, of course, is what steps do you think that can be made to affirmatively make the effort to be more inclusive of the total creative body of activity that's out there right now?
Yeah, I agree that that's an issue, because as I'm sort of listening to the conversation, I think that if Design Week or this event or events that people were looking to sort of harness and put a circle around, in many ways there's this push and pull. Is it big? Is it small? And I think going back to the fundamental question around how do you have an organizing principle around creating something, and does it become something very large, cutting across all design disciplines, or is it something very small where you're highlighting a certain type of design or a certain type of designer? I think that's going to be a fundamental question for this effort as it grows. Is it big or is it small? And then how do you program it in a way that is something that is, because in many ways what makes Fashion Week work is that it's very narrow, right, in relative to the question of design. What makes Open House New York work and be such a great event is it's a very limited amount of time where people are really anxious to get tickets. So there is a limiting piece, I think, that's important to the process. But I also think it's important to potentially to make it even more interesting is actually tapping into these communities that are currently not a part of it. So do you do something in Jamaica, Queens, where there's design happening there? Do you have it in Sunset Park and having the tours of the industrial space that Andrew is programming? Do you have it events in the South Bronx, where we're also seeing a lot of really interesting people looking at space? So I do think that's going to be an important part. It all comes down to this question of how do you organizing it? How do you organizing it? How do you organize it? What are you trying to highlight, and who's making those decisions?
I think the fact that last year our city council leaders were behind this effort fully, and again, because of the transitions, we have to reestablish some of these relationships, but they embraced it, and it was great to have both council and the mayor's office embrace this. So from the council side, they were very active in trying to get community groups to participate. I think you're right, it's a matter of what is that rally cry? Is it about developing a workforce type of approach to it, or is it like products of design seen everywhere? There are so many different ways to go in, and hopefully this steering committee of 50 people can actually address all of these topics.
Well, and Caroline also mentioned public school element, and I wonder if you could expand on that too. I mean, the thing I heard the gentleman in the back really pointing out is that there's a sort of demographic narrowness to the design fields that maybe this is an opportunity to challenge. And I'm wondering, I know Cooper-Hewitt does educational programming in public schools, right?
Thank you. Now I have 2 mics. As many of you know, we are under the knife at Cooper-Hewitt, and we've been closed for 2 years for this very ambitious renovation. And it's been a wonderful opportunity to fly our flag nationally and globally in really innovative ways. And one of those ways that's very close to our hearts is educating the public, and starting with kindergartners all the way to the 12th grade. So it's called Design in the Classroom, and we basically teach teachers to go into the classroom and integrate design into that class. So a couple of weeks ago, for example, I was in a biology class, and it was 7th graders, and they start the session with what is design, and these kids have wonderful answers. We have principals and superintendents begging us to come to their classrooms. We've impacted over 20,000 kids in the time that we've been renovating. And we plan to really, really expand this and hope to expand nationally. But my whole point is, yes, it's all about education, but it's education at every single level of life. So for adults, I feel very adamantly that we all know about New York City Design Week. I would really love to do a design competition that really gets everyone involved. So whether it's something that really bothers me is, on the Upper West Side or Upper East Side, the subways tell you, 1 minute for the 2 train or for the 4 train. You go to Greenpoint, you're waiting for 25 minutes and you have absolutely no idea. I bring that up because I think we should do a design competition looking at the subway system. And you can't tell me that every New Yorker would not get involved, whether they're in first grade or whether they're 85 years old. And I think this would be a great way to open people's eyes to NYC by design, the power of design, and how everyone can make a difference.
A great way to harness frustration with the MTA.
I also think to talk about that, diversifying and finding the needs in a way and something that is percolating at the steering committee right now is a job fair. And I think that's a really good way to actually, invite companies to, find out what their needs are, whether it's a designer submitting a product or whether it's, anyone from any educational standpoint coming in to find a job and finding out what what jobs people are looking for, and to find out what jobs are actually available, and then to actually invite companies in who can help fill those needs. So I think that's one way that we can integrate education for everyone, but then also jobs for the people who need them in New York and how do we keep them here, and as designers or anyone else.
Leslie? Leslie.
Thank you, Kyle.
I couldn't even see you.
I'm Leslie Hutchin. I run Governor's Island. And we've had the great experience, actually, of hosting 3 different major design projects. Obviously, the Cooper-Hewitt graphic design, Pioneers of Change, which the Dutch government underwrote, and actually LVMH underwrote a collaboration, I don't know if anyone's here, from Parsons on artisanship. And so I think the good news is that the public loves this stuff and comes in enormous numbers to see things that are created by the design industry. But speaking not as Governor's Island, but just as a private citizen, what I find sort of missing from this whole conversation is that this is about commerce. Like the design industry, you guys work in the private sector. And when you point to all of these examples, ICCF, Maison Objet, London Design Week, it's Fashion Week, Fashion Night Out, those were all created because there's an economic engine that drives those events. And adding on the visibility, and this has happened, I think, with Fashion Week and it's moved to Olympic Center, where there's a lot of sort of public-facing events in addition to industry events, but really, like, this has to have an economic value proposition for the city, and so there are plenty retailers I mean, you name it, right? When you think about who employs designers, and it's not going to be architecture firms who are not the most well endowed of the companies that employ people in the design industry. But I think if you look at what's been successful, what we've learned on Governor's Island is one of the reasons people like to do projects out there is because they get visibility instantly. It's really hard to break through the clutter in New York. And I think the things that you're talking about break through the clutter in their cities because they have an economic value proposition. And I don't think you should lose sight of that in thinking about how to go forward.
You have something to say?
I have something really, yes, can I borrow your mic? I think we did this. When we did the Gates project, the Bloomberg administration was new and they cleared the way with the city agencies. Then Christo and Jean-Claude raised $21 million. Then you guys, Economic Development Corporation, measured it. In 16 wet, snowy days in February, the city raised $254 million that it would not have had. And you measured it. And you are so right, Leslie. Commerce was a big driver. It was things that were sold for Christo, memorial, watches and whatever. It was hotels, it was cafes, it was bars, it was restaurants. We can do it, and we should.
Well, okay, one last question. You've had your hand up for a little while. And then,
Okay, I'm Laura Starr from Starr White House, Landscape Architects and Planners, and also former president of the ASLA. I just wanted to bring to light that I think we're at an infrastructure design crossroads right now with the Sandy recovery, and there's this huge HUD competition going on with a lot of the leading landscape architecture and architecture firms in the city looking at re-envisioning our infrastructure, and there's a big question, are we going to make some big moves that will be like the Central Parks and the Highlines of the future, or are we going to do this piecemeal? I think that with the new administration, this is something that your effort could really help to keep the big design visioning going as we confront these, potentially huge investments for the future of our city.
Over here.
Yeah, just one quick thing. Hi, I'm Lee Wright, and I run my own firm for the last 11 years. But prior to that, for 12 years, I worked in global architectural firms. And one of the things I feel is that there's a collaboration. Everybody wants to collaborate. You guys are all talking more from large companies here and architectural firms, and as an interior architect that works in a smaller world, there's a lot of people that work in silos. So there is a call, and I'm here because I believe that everybody wants to work together. There's a whole untapped potential for people to come in and make New York the top of the game, but we've got to come up with a plan from the top down, because there's a lot of people I know who are operating in isolation because they just don't see the plan and the vision. So the collaboration and to help bring money back into the design industry, because I'm holistic. I believe that it makes a difference in the way that we live, work, and operate. However, we all have to survive, right? So it's got to be a way to make it thrive as well.
And Jonathan, you had a question.
Actually, I have two questions. When I started, I talked about how New York City graduates more than twice as many designers and architects as any other city in the U.S. And I'm just curious, I know Peter talked a little bit about this earlier, but I wanted a perspective from the panelists. To what extent last year were the city's design universities a big part of Design Week? And I think that they were a part of it, but what more could be done to bring in those universities this year and in the future?
They were definitely involved. Last year, most of the schools had representatives actively participating in all the steering committee, organizing events, rallying all of the student pieces shows into the fold. I do think that there could be a stronger move that they could play, but again, it's tough. I teach in multiple programs in New York City as well, and that moment in time, no one's sleeping on both like the faculty side and the student side to get everything up and out the door. So it's really difficult. But I would say that the profile of the students is something we have to consider. Everywhere around the world, they're sending their kids to New York to get training, from Korea to Russia, China, and so it's not necessarily only just like the U.S. in that student body population, and so something to consider going to house ecosystem idea. Where are they going? Are they getting their educated here and then leaving, or are they starting businesses here? Do we have a great platform to help people build their business? Because the moment that one designer is birthed into New York, is there a constellation of other people that they would ultimately hire and support? And so understanding and mapping that ecosystem to decide where resources should be placed. Is it to support emerging students? Is it to support the design universities more? Great question, and it would be great to have some of that research done.
You answered it.
I mean, my company is looking for emerging talent, and that's where to find it in the schools. So, Peter mentioned about a plan, and you have all this money that you're investing into, launching careers. It's about connecting with a company like mine and all the other companies that are out there that these students can show their work into, and then create studios and stay here. So.
Actually, to that point, it's not just about the idea of creating studios, or it is an aspect of actually working here. So let's say that there's students that are graduating, and there's potential actually helping certain communities, certain neighborhoods, or very small companies within those particular neighborhoods that larger companies basically will not touch. And that one single student can actually enable and also communicate within the aspects of design towards that shopkeeper per se. So that's a very important factor for the 50,000 plus students that are within our particular economy.
The other thing to remember is that at ICFF and Wanted, we do have student work displayed. And a model that I keep in mind is at ECAD, which is a great Swiss design school. Christophe and other luxury firms come in and fund the efforts of the students, so they actually produce their works. And this creates a great ripple effect because the public wants to see and buy what the students are doing. And I really hope that we can make that happen in New York City too.
Great, I just had one last question, and that it was, there's amazing talent, amazing kind of representation from different design and architecture firms and schools here. And if anybody wants to get involved in this year's Design Week, what should they do? Willie, is there some way they should contact you, or how can they get involved?
Yeah, they can contact any one of us sitting here. We're all dedicating for the next few weeks and months up until the events to try to make this event be the best that it is. I think we will be thinking about beyond this year as well. So all ideas here, it would be great. Send it to I think what's our account at NYC by Design at NYCgo. Yeah, at NYCgo.com. We can send it out through the Center for Urban Futures.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great. This probably should be our last question. Margaret, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Margaret Newman, and I'm just recently with the city and now with the Municipal Art Society. I just wanted to say, I think there's been a number of really spectacular comments, and I love Carolyn's idea about the education piece. But I think one of the things that Willie, you're in a position to do, I think a lot of the city agencies, having just worked with many of them, are doing spectacular things working with designers. We just worked with Pentagram extensively on the city wayfinding system. I think there's lots of things there are 250,000 people who work for the city who actually probably don't even know some of the impacts of really great design that the city is actually sponsoring. And I think to have people understand that and support that, I think it gets it into the grassroots and really into the sort of DNA of the city. And so I think the possibility, one, of organizing this event from the top down, I think EDC and NYC and Company are in a fabulous place to not only fundraise, but to sort of thematically organize this. So I would looking to you guys to get into it. DDC, every city agency actually has little bits and pieces that I think no one even within the city has connected the dots. I think the AIA had a great idea of having a deputy mayor for design. I don't think it's going to happen in this administration, but some way to convene that interest and energy, which is still sort of nascent within all of the agencies.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Supporting design not only from the consumption standpoint on the government side, but it would be important, I think, to highlight that we spend doing development projects, DDC, DOT, we spend a tremendous amount of time thinking about design in ways that you don't even see, from street grades to benches to big buildings to affordable housing. We have just been spending a ton of time thinking about elements of design to make sure that what we're doing and spending city money on will stand the test of time. So I do think that's an important point to both consume good design, but also to highlight the painstaking efforts that the city's making to design well.
I totally hear you, Margaret. I think it's a storytelling effort that designers are really great at, and you need to do to tell that story. And I often, over the last year or two, think about how the city does do great things. Private entities in New York do great things. It might be that the lead is not design. It might have been technology. It might have been some other discipline that got the spotlight, when in fact, like, the second entity that helped create it was the design industry. And so I think telling the story in the right way and would be the thing to do.
I mean, it's not really best practices per se, but the fact here is that I think somebody brought it up that design really just enhances our life, our lifestyle, and it's really important when you consider this, where if there are solutions that come out of New York City, how can it affect America in general? How can it affect how the federal government actually deals with certain issues? And I think that's a very important factor. And I think that, coming from Great Britain, a very small country in comparison to here, that does happen on a year-to-year basis. You can actually see that design really pours into the fabric of how the government, the federal government, communicates to its people, and it's really through the cities and also different programs that have actually occurred in different townships and different neighborhoods that affects everybody. And I think that's a very important aspect to sort of.
I was told I was unjustly ignoring someone on this side of the room, so I apologize to you, but I should introduce our board member, Tom Vecchione, for the closing remarks. Tom, can you come up?
It's working. I was going to make you all turn around for a change of pace, but 2 seconds. I want to make a plug for Jonathan and his team. I'm so happy to be, I'm proud to be on the board at CUF. I mean, it's really changed Gensler's thinking. I don't know if you know Gensler, but we're a very large design firm, probably the biggest in the world, about 5,000 people, 46 offices today, probably 48 tomorrow, maybe 50 on Friday. But Jonathan and his team does a great job, and they've really given us huge insights into all the reports that they do, and they really shape and curate how we think. I'm also very happy to be on the board of MAS and working with Margaret, and that's another perspective about the city. So, but I wanted to bring up one quick thing that is a really perplexing paradigm in the design world. I don't know if it has to do with Design New York. I don't know if it has to do with this conversation, but and I really appreciate the gentleman in the back who talked about diversity and growth and career pathing, or alluded to that. And one of the interesting things is, seeing the scale of design, whether it's the Hudson Yards, or whether it's Fulton, or whether it's South Street Seaport, or whether it's the World Trade Center. I'll talk about architecture, but seeing the impact of design, the scale of design, right? There's one side of it, and then seeing the next generation of talent, and seeing the discrepancy, the economic discrepancy between those two things. The money and investment and power in design that shapes this city, and the next generation of talent struggling to live here, struggling to get a job. If you're an investment banker, like most of my very smart friends are, which I'm not, or if you're a consultant at McKinsey, or if you're a technology guru, you're starting at a $120,000 salary out of college. You're joining a firm with a very strong career path. You understand where you're going to go. You might go on to being an entrepreneur, but you know what your career path is. You join a white shoe law firm, $125,000. Get to associate, get to senior associate, get to partner. I think it's up to the design industry, and this is a great conversation, but it's up to the design industry to really figure out what is the economy of design, and how do we have the next generation talent, because we can talk about all the programs, we can talk all about this. If we don't have talent, and if New York isn't a gravitational pull for people to make their life, and make their money, and raise their children, through sustainable economies around design, then we can do all this conversation, but it's not going to go anywhere. And I think there's a real discrepancy in that, because there's a lot of money being made, and there's a lot of money not being distributed. And we need to understand how to portal into that in many different ways. And this conversation starts to do it, because I think this is one way to engage people. Gensler has tried, as his best, to build a focus on stock ownership, on career pathing, on all the things that we copy from McKinsey, we copy from our law firms, we copy from clients. We didn't look to the design industry, and this is not a PR, we have lots more to go. It's not a PR thing for Gensler at all. We've got a lot of things we need to shape, but we looked at other forms. We looked at Goldman Sachs, we looked at McKinsey, we looked at law firms to see how do they structure their network, how do they grow their staff, how do they create viable economic platforms for their people to raise families, to grow, and to live in this city. And I think one of the things I'd like to see happening is all of us who are in the design community, I know there's a lot of us, step back and say, what are the healthcare systems I'm giving my employees? What are the overtime benefits I'm giving my employees? Am I really paying competitive salaries? Am I really doing justice? Because a lot of design firms don't do that. And we really need to step back and think about that, because this economy will not survive without talent. And we've got a lot of people competing for our talent. We've got technology companies that are stealing left and right designers. Financial services are stealing engineers. Everybody is mining into our talent base today. The movie industry, the media industry, it's all coming here. And they're taking away our talent if we talk about design itself. And we need to be really cautious about that. So those are my closing words. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Pat.